Same planet, same year. The average woman in one of these countries will have nearly 9 times as many children as the average woman in the other. The country with almost no money is reproducing itself many times over. The country with one of the highest per capita incomes on Earth is producing roughly a third of the children needed to sustain its population. This is not an exception, it is the rule. The richest, most educated, most urbanized societies on Earth are shrinking. The poorest, most rural, least educated societies on Earth are still growing. The same forces that lift a society out of poverty appear to push it below replacement. The question is why? The map of human reproduction in 2024 splits the world along a clear line. The lowest fertility rates are concentrated in East Asia, Southern and Eastern Europe, and high-income enclaves elsewhere. South Korea, 0.75. Hong Kong, 0.77. Taiwan, 0.87. Singapore, 0.97. China, 1.00. Italy, 1.20. Japan, 1.20. Spain, 1.12. Greece, 1.26. Poland, 1.16. Germany, 1.35. Canada, 1.33. Finland, 1.32. The United Kingdom, 1.44. The United States, 1.60. France, the highest in Europe, 1.62. Not one developed country reproduces at replacement. The highest fertility rates on Earth are concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa. Niger, 6.7. Somalia, 6.1. Chad, 6.1. The Democratic Republic of Congo, 6.1. Mali, 5.8. Angola, 5.3. Nigeria, 5.0. Tanzania, 4.7. Uganda, 4.5. South Sudan, 4.5. The countries reproducing at the highest rates are also among the poorest, with GDP per capita typically below $2,000. They have limited or absent welfare systems. They have the highest housing precariousness on Earth and frequent food insecurity. If the cost of living were the binding constraint on human reproduction, the explanation most often given in wealthy countries for falling birth rates, then the poorest countries on Earth should have the lowest fertility rates. They have the highest. The 2020 Lancet projection by Lancet and colleagues at the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, and the updated 2024 projections by Bhattacharjee and colleagues, describe what the demographic split becomes if current trends hold. In 2021, sub-Saharan Africa accounted for 29% of all births on Earth. By 2050, it is projected to account for 41%. By 2100, more than half of all human births will occur in sub-Saharan Africa. By the end of this century, on the same projections, only 6 countries on Earth, concentrated in that region, are expected to remain above replacement-level fertility. Every other continent will be in population decline. The shape of population pyramids on the rich side of the split is inverting. What was historically a triangle, many young, fewer middle-aged, very few old, is becoming a column, then a top-heavy oval. Japan loses approximately 500,000 people every year net. Italy's population peaked in 2015 and has been falling since. South Korea's population is on track to halve by the end of the century. On the poor side, the pyramid still has its base. The median age in Niger is 14.5, in Mali, 16, in Uganda, 16.5. The median age in Italy is 48, in Japan, 49.6, in South Korea, 44.5. These are not minor differences. They describe 2 civilizations on opposite trajectories. The question is why one is shrinking and the other is growing. The economic theory that explains why wealth correlates with low fertility is over 6 decades old. In 1960, economist Gary Becker, later a Nobel laureate, published an economic analysis of fertility. He proposed that as societies modernized, parents would shift from having many children to having fewer children with much greater investment in each. He called this the quantity-quality trade-off. His framework, expanded in the 1981 Treatise on the Family, has been validated across virtually every country that has modernized since. There are 6 reinforcing mechanisms that drive fertility down in wealthy societies. The first mechanism is the quantity-quality trade-off itself. In a knowledge economy, raising a child to be competitive requires extraordinary inputs of money and parental time. Education, healthcare, enrichment, housing and school catchment areas. Eventually, university tuition. The marginal cost of a child rises by orders of magnitude compared to subsistence or even industrial economies. Across developed countries, the parental time spent per child has actually risen since the 1960s, even as the number of children per family has fallen. American mothers in 2024 spend more time with each child than American mothers in 1965 did, despite higher labor force participation. Sociologist Annette Leroux termed this concerted cultivation. The modern model of parenting in which children are scheduled, instructed, supervised, and developed almost continuously. It is what raising a child to middle-class standards now means. This intensity has a cost, and the cost is dosage limited. You can do it for 1 child, 2 with strain, 3 at the upper limit of what most modern households can sustain. In South Korea, parents typically spend between $300,000 and $500,000, 1 per month, on private cram schools per child. Total cost of raising a single Korean child at university graduation reaches between $225,000 and $375,000 US dollars, among the highest in the world. In Japan, the Juku tutoring system performs the same function. In China, urban middle-class parents pay for English tutors before age 4. In the United Kingdom and the United States, private education and tutoring have spread from elite to upper middle-class families. The pattern is consistent. The second mechanism, the single strongest predictor of fertility anywhere on Earth, is female educational attainment. The mechanism, again from Becker, is the opportunity cost of women's time. As a woman's earning potential rises, the income she forgoes by stepping out of the labor force to raise a child rises with it. A 2013 study by Pradhan and Canning estimated that 1 additional year of female schooling in Ethiopia reduced the probability of teenage birth by 7 percentage points. Comparable findings appear across Pakistan, Taiwan, Latin America, and the United States. A 2022 IMF Finance and Development article by Doepke, Hanush, Kinderman, and Tertilt. The New Economics of Fertility found that fertility behavior in modern economies has decoupled from simple income or contraception availability and now responds primarily to career-family compatibility. A subsistence farmer in Niger loses essentially nothing by having a child. She continues farming with the infant carried with her. A corporate professional in Tokyo, Berlin, or New York potentially loses years of career trajectory, possibly her job, possibly her promotion track entirely. Same baby, different math. The third mechanism is urbanization. Cities everywhere depress fertility. The reasons are mechanical. Apartments are smaller. Childcare is expensive. Extended family networks are absent. The cost of every additional child compounds. Within developed countries, the pattern is consistent. Rural fertility runs 30 to 80% higher than urban fertility in the same country. Tokyo's fertility rate is 0.99. Rural Akita Prefecture, 1.31. Seoul's is 0.55, rural South Jeolla above 1.0, New York City roughly 1.5, rural Utah above 2.0. In 1960, roughly 1 in 3 humans lived in a city. In 2024, the figure is 57%. A more urban world is, mechanically, a less reproductive world. The fourth mechanism is the modern welfare state. In every society throughout history before the 20th century, children were old age insurance. Without pensions, healthcare, or capital markets that reliably stored value across decades, parents relied on adult children for support in old age. Having more children was rational risk diversification. The modern welfare state severs this. Pensions, public healthcare, social security, these institutions in advanced economies replace the economic function adult children once served. The state becomes the retirement plan. This is not an argument against the welfare state. It is an observation about its second-order effects. One of the most powerful pro-welfare developments in human history has also been one of the most powerful anti-natal forces ever introduced. The fifth mechanism is what economists call endogenous quality standards. The local definition of what a properly raised child requires rises with national income. A working-class American family in 1955 raised 3 or 4 children in a 1,000 square foot house, with 1 car on a single income, with no college fund, no organized sports, no tutoring. Public school. Vacations meant driving to a relative's house. Real income in the United States is significantly higher today than in 1955, and yet today's middle class reports being unable to afford more than one or two children. The absolute cost of food, clothing, and basic necessities has not risen. What has risen is the social definition of what a child must consume to be raised correctly. The peers, the in-laws, the schools, the parents themselves will not allow a 1955 standard. The sixth mechanism is the deepest. Demographers call it the second demographic transition. Articulated by Belgian sociologist Ron Lesteye and Dutch demographer Dirk van de Ka in 1986, and revisited in peer-reviewed papers in Population and Development Review and the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the framework describes a values shift across modern societies, from family-centered identity toward individual self-realization. Marriage occurs later or is foregone. Cohabitation rises. Childlessness becomes acceptable, then common, then in some cohorts a majority. Career, education, travel, partnerships, even pets compete with parenthood as paths to a meaningful life. Lestege explicitly draws on Maslow's hierarchy of needs to formalize this. As basic security needs are met, populations shift toward higher-order self-actualization needs, which prove largely incompatible with high fertility behavior. Across the OECD, the share of women in their 20s reporting they want 0 children has risen by double digits since 2000 in nearly every country measured. In Korea, that figure is approaching 2/3. These 6 mechanisms on the quantity-quality trade-off, the opportunity cost of women's time, urbanization, the welfare state, the cultural floor, and the values shift operate in every developed country. Together, they are sufficient to explain why every wealthy society on Earth has fallen below replacement. There is a country that on its surface appears to defy this pattern: the United States. Unlike Japan, South Korea, Italy, or Spain, the American population continues to grow. It will likely continue growing through 2080. Its school enrollments are not collapsing, its housing markets are not depopulating, its cities are not visibly emptying. This is, however, an illusion. The total fertility rate in the United States in 2024 was 1.60, among the lowest figures ever recorded for the country and well below replacement. The fertility rate of women born in the United States is essentially the same as the overall figure. American women, native and immigrant alike, are having children at rates that, on their own, would put the country on the same demographic curve as Italy, Spain, or Germany. The reason the American population continues to grow is not American fertility. It is immigration. The Center for Immigration Studies reports that between 2000 and 2019, immigration added 37 million people to the United States, equal to 79% of total population growth in that period. Between 2021 and 2023 alone, the immigrant population grew by 2.52 million, equal to 83% of the total increase in the United States population. The Congressional Budget Office, in its 2024 demographic outlook, was explicit. Net immigration accounts for an increasing share of population growth and is projected to account for all American population growth beginning in 2040. The Penn-Wharton budget model has run the counterfactual. Without net immigration, the United States population would peak within a decade and begin to decline by mid-century, on roughly the same trajectory as Western Europe. The American demographic exception is not an exception. It is a sleight of hand. The country looks demographically healthy because it is importing the children that other countries had. The native birth rate has been below replacement since 2007. The same is true of nearly every wealthy English-speaking country and most of Western Europe. The United Kingdom's fertility rate is 1.44. Its population grows through net immigration. Canada's has fallen to 1.26, among the lowest in the developed world. And its population growth is now almost entirely driven by immigration. Australia's is 1.50. Germany's population has been growing only because of immigration since 1972. Without inflows, the German population would have begun shrinking more than 50 years ago. The countries that do show visible demographic decline, Japan, South Korea, Italy, are largely the countries that have not used immigration as a population strategy. The decline is happening in all of them. The question is whether it is masked or visible. There is, however, a deeper problem with the immigration strategy. The pool is drying up. Mexico, the largest single source of immigration to the United States for half a century, had a fertility rate of 6.6 in 1970. Today, it is approximately 1.8, below replacement. The Philippines, a major source for the United States and Europe, has fallen to 1.9. India, projected to overtake China as the world's most populous country, has already fallen below replacement at 1.98. China's fertility rate is approximately 1.0. Vietnam, 1.91. Iran, 1.7. Brazil, 1.6. Thailand, 1.3. Turkey, 1.62. The countries that have historically supplied immigrants to the rich world are themselves now below replacement or rapidly approaching it. The reservoir of potential migrants from middle-income countries is finite. By the second half of this century, the only major source of demographic surplus left on Earth will be sub-Saharan Africa. The American Mirage works for a generation, perhaps two. Then the math arrives. The mechanisms that suppress fertility in wealthy societies operate in reverse where wealth has not yet arrived. There are six again, mirroring the six that drive the rich world decline. The first and most fundamental, in a subsistence or near-subsistence economy, children are productive assets. A child of 6 can fetch water and mind smaller siblings. A child of 8 can watch livestock. A child of 10 can work in fields. By adolescence, in many subsistence contexts, a child produces more than they consume. By adulthood, they directly support their parents. A child in modern Tokyo, Berlin, or New York is a pure consumption good for 2 decades or more. A child in rural Niger is, by age 10, a contributor to the household economy. The same biological human, in different economic contexts, has opposite economic effects on the family. The second mechanism is old age insurance. In countries without pensions, public health care for the elderly, or capital markets that reliably store value across decades, adult children are the retirement plan. Having more children is rational risk diversification. Some may die young, some may move away, some may themselves be poor. Parents who want 3 reliable adult supporters in old age may need to have 5 or 6 children. The expansion of state-provided pensions and healthcare in wealthy countries severed this calculation. In countries where the state has not yet replaced the family as the old age safety net, the calculation remains intact. The third mechanism is infant mortality. Where 1 in 10 children die before age 5, a level that still characterizes parts of sub-Saharan Africa, parents who want 3 surviving adult children must have 4 or 5. The cultural inertia of these insurance births persists for a generation or 2 after mortality drops. Niger's child mortality rate has fallen substantially since 2000, but its fertility has only begun to respond. The same lag was observed in 19th century Europe. The fourth mechanism is the opportunity cost of women's time, in reverse. Where female educational attainment is low and labor markets do not offer formal employment to women, the income foregone by motherhood is small or zero. A subsistence farmer continues working with the infant carried with her. Where female education spreads, fertility falls. The pattern is observable inside individual sub-Saharan countries. Educated urban Nigerian women have approximately 3 children. Uneducated rural Nigerian women have approximately 7. The single largest predictor of differential fertility within these countries is years of schooling for women. The current high fertility of sub-Saharan Africa is, in significant part, the demographic consequence of female educational attainment that has not yet caught up with the rest of the world. The fifth mechanism is the persistence of pre-modern social structures. Where urbanization is limited, where extended family networks remain intact, where children are minded collectively, where religious and traditional norms still valorize fertility, large families remain a default rather than a choice. Sub-Saharan Africa is the least urbanized region on Earth. Most of the population lives in rural areas. Family networks remain strong. Marriage is near universal. Childlessness is socially deviant. Norms favor large families. These conditions describe most of human history. They are atypical only relative to the modern wealthy world. The sixth mechanism is access to family planning. In high fertility countries, contraceptive prevalence remains low. Niger, approximately 18% of married women using modern methods. Chad, 8%. South Sudan, 6%. The combination of supply constraints, distribution, cost, and demand constraints, cultural acceptability, partner cooperation, limits voluntary fertility reduction. Where access to contraception expands and women have actual choice, fertility falls quickly. Iran's fertility fell from 6.5 to below replacement in 30 years, in part because of an aggressive family planning program in the 1990s. Bangladesh's fell from 6.9 to 2.0 over similar timeframes. These 6 mechanisms, children as economic assets, old age insurance, mortality insurance, low opportunity cost of women's time, intact traditional structures, and limited family planning, describe the conditions under which most of human history has been spent. They describe a society where having many children is rational, expected, and culturally reinforced. A poor woman in Niger having her 6th child is not making a different cost calculation than a Brooklyn 32-year-old considering her first. She is operating inside an entirely different economic logic of what a child is. The fertility split between rich and poor is real. It is also, on closer inspection, narrowing. Most middle-income countries are converging toward the rich world pattern, faster than the rich world did itself. Iran's fertility fell from 6.5 in 1980 to 1.7 today. Brazil from 5.0 to 1.6. Thailand from 5.0 to 1.3. Mexico from 6.6 to 1.8. Turkey from 5.5 to 1.62. Vietnam from 5.4 to 1.91. India from 5.4 to 1.98. China, accelerated by the one-child policy and continuing afterward, from 5.5 to roughly 1.0. What took Western Europe 150 years took these countries 30 to 50. The reason, according to the demographic literature, is that the modernity package now arrives in a more concentrated form. A country undergoing rapid urbanization, expanding female education, falling infant mortality, exposure to global media depicting smaller families, and the introduction of modern contraception experiences, these forces simultaneously rather than sequentially. The result is faster fertility decline. Today, the countries with sustained high fertility are largely confined to a band stretching from Mali through the Sahel into Central Africa. Most of the rest of the world has either completed the transition or is in its later stages. The sub-Saharan African countries themselves are also showing signs of fertility decline, though more slowly than other regions. Ethiopia has fallen from 7.0 to 4.0. Kenya from 8.0 to 3.2. Even Niger has fallen from 7.6 to 6.7. The 2024 Lancet update by Bhattacharjee and colleagues projects that by 2100 sub-Saharan Africa itself will be approaching replacement-level fertility, with only a handful of countries remaining above it. The split between rich and poor, in other words, is not permanent. It is a transitional state. The end state, projected for the late 21st century, is global sub-replacement fertility. The rich got there first. Everyone else is following. Every wealthy country that has fallen below replacement has, at some point in the past 50 years, attempted to raise its fertility rate through public policy. South Korea has spent approximately $270 billion since 2006 on cash bonuses, subsidized housing, fertility treatment, parental leave, and a Ministry of Population Strategy. Its fertility rate has declined every single year of that program. Hungary has spent approximately 5% of GDP, among the highest in the world, on family policy, including lifetime income tax exemption for mothers of 4 or more children. Hungarian fertility rose from 1.23 to 1.55, then plateaued. It remains well below replacement. Singapore offers the most generous baby bonus in the developed world. Its fertility has not exceeded 1.2 in over a decade. China abandoned its one-child policy in 2015, encouraged 2 children, then 3. Chinese fertility has continued to fall. Italy, Spain, Greece, Japan, Germany, and Russia have each launched substantial pro-natal policies. None has restored fertility to replacement. The pattern is consistent across the literature. Pro-natal cash transfers can shift the timing of births that would have happened anyway. They have not been demonstrated to manufacture demand for children that does not exist. The Nordic counterexample deserves attention. Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and France maintain fertility rates between 1.5 and 1.8. still below replacement, but well above Korean or Japanese levels. They share three features: heavily subsidized public childcare from infancy, generous parental leave with strong father quotas, and labor markets that meaningfully accommodate working mothers. These do not restore replacement fertility. They soften the decline. No country, anywhere, has voluntarily pushed its fertility back above replacement after falling below it. The closest historical case is Romania under Ceausescu in 1966, achieved by criminalizing contraception and abortion. The resulting cohort produced a generation of orphans, abuse, and ultimately the revolution that overthrew the regime. It is not a model. The honest reading of the evidence is that no developed country has yet identified a policy lever capable of reversing the trend. The picture that emerges from the demographic literature projected to the end of this century is a world fundamentally different from the one that existed at its start. In 1950, the world's population was 2.5 billion, distributed roughly: Asia 55%, Europe 22%, Africa 9%, the Americas 14%. In 2024, the world's population is 8.1 billion, distributed: Asia 59%, Africa 19%, the Americas 13%, Europe 9%. By 2100, on the Lancet projections, world population is expected to peak around 9.7 billion in the 2060s and decline thereafter. The distribution: Africa 38%, Asia 45%, the Americas 11%, Europe 6%. Africa, which contained 9% of humanity in 1950, will contain nearly 40% by the end of this century. Europe, which contained 22%, will contain 6%. The center of human gravity is shifting south. By the end of the 21st century, the median human being on Earth will be African. The age structure is also inverting. Today, there are roughly 4 people of working age for every retired person, globally. By 2100, that ratio will be closer to 2 to 1. In several developed countries, it will fall below 1 to 1. The economic and political implications are direct. Pension systems were designed for the old triangle. Healthcare systems were designed for it. Real estate markets, consumer demand, military recruitment, tax bases, all designed for it. The triangle is disappearing. In its place is the cobra head, a small base supporting a large elderly population in country after country. The countries that arrived at this configuration first, Japan, Italy, South Korea, are showing what the adjustment looks like: slow growth or stagnation, soaring social spending obligations, empty schools converted into elder care facilities, rural depopulation, pension shortfalls, labor shortages, cultural anxiety. The rest of the developed world is on the same path, 10 to 30 years behind. The middle-income world is on the path, 20 to 50 years behind. Sub-Saharan Africa, 80 to 100 years behind. The split between the rich shrinking and the poor growing is real today. By 2100, on current projections, it will be largely closed. Everyone will be on the same trajectory. Up to this point, this report has described a phenomenon: the numbers, the mechanisms, the divergence between rich and poor, the convergence projected for the end of the century. What it has not addressed is whether any of this is a problem. The honest answer is that the data describes outcomes. It does not, on its own, tell us whether those outcomes are catastrophic, manageable, or in some respects desirable. Different observers, looking at the same numbers, reach different conclusions. What the data can do is anchor the conversation. 4 questions tend to dominate it. Each can be answered, at least partially, with what we know. Question 1. Will the economies of shrinking countries collapse? The first question is the most direct. If a country's working age population shrinks, does its economy shrink with it? The mechanical answer is yes. Economic output is, in part, a function of how many people are working. The OECD projects that across its member countries, the working age population will fall by 13% over the next 40 years. GDP per capita is projected to fall by approximately 14% by 2060 as a direct result, in the absence of offsetting productivity gains. That is a substantial reduction. It would represent the first sustained, multi-decade contraction of per capita wealth in the developed world since the Industrial Revolution. The qualifier matters. The 14% figure assumes current productivity trends. It does not assume offsetting gains from automation artificial intelligence, extended working lives, or higher female labor force participation. Japan offers the closest thing we have to a real-world experiment. It has been losing working-age population for over 30 years. Its economy has not collapsed. It has experienced sustained low growth, periodic deflation, and significant fiscal strain. But its citizens have remained, by international standards, prosperous. Unemployment is low. Public order is stable. Standards of living, while stagnant, remain high. The closest historical analogs to large-scale population decline: the Black Death in 14th century Europe, post-Soviet Russia in the 1990s, post-war Germany, produced different outcomes depending on the institutional and technological context. Severe in some cases, manageable in others. The honest answer is that no developed economy has yet faced the scale of demographic shrinkage projected for Japan, Korea, Italy, or Germany by 2070. There is no precedent. We do not know whether it will be navigated through automation and productivity gains, whether it will produce sustained recession, or whether the answer will vary country by country. What the data does tell us is that the adjustment is not optional. It is arriving. Question 2. What happens to pension and healthcare systems? The second question concerns the institutions that constitute the modern welfare state. Pensions, public healthcare, and long-term care for the elderly are funded, in most developed countries, by the working-age population. The implicit contract is that today's workers fund today's retirees, on the expectation that tomorrow's workers will fund them in turn. The contract assumes a roughly stable ratio between workers and retirees. That ratio is changing. In 1970, the developed world averaged roughly 5 working-age adults for every person over 65. Today, that figure is closer to 3. By 2050, on current projections, it will fall to roughly 2. In some countries, Japan, Korea, Italy, it will fall below 2. The IMF, in a 2015 analysis updated several times since, identified pension and healthcare obligations as the single largest fiscal pressure facing developed economies over the coming decades. The United States Congressional Budget Office projects that by 2029, the country will spend $3 trillion per year, half the federal budget, on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security combined. China is projected to have nearly 500 million people over the age of 60 by 2040. Japan's population is projected to shrink by 20 million by 2050. Nearly half of those who remain will be classified as dependents, most of them retirees. The fiscal mathematics produces 3 options for any country facing this trajectory. 1. Raise taxes on the shrinking working-age population. 2. Reduce benefits for the growing retiree population. 3. Borrow against the future to finance the present. Most developed countries are pursuing some combination of all 3. France raised its retirement age in 2023 and saw mass protests. The United Kingdom has incrementally raised its state pension age. Germany is debating the same. The United States Social Security Trust Fund is currently projected to be unable to pay full benefits beginning in 2033. None of these adjustments by themselves restores fiscal balance. They postpone it. The polite term in the demographic literature is the unsustainable trajectory. The fiscal systems of the developed world, as currently configured, cannot operate indefinitely with the demographic profile arriving over the next 30 years. What replaces them is a political question, not a demographic one. The data establishes only that something will have to. Question 3. Is a smaller human population, on net, good or bad? The third question is the most contested. A persistent strand of environmental and economic thought has argued that a smaller human population would be, on balance, beneficial. Less pressure on natural resources, lower carbon emissions, reduced strain on housing markets, higher wages for workers in tighter labor markets, better child-to-adult ratios for those children who are born. A persistent counterstrand has argued the opposite. Innovation correlates with population size and density. Economic dynamism depends on a young, growing workforce. Cultural production, scientific discovery, and political stability all benefit from demographic vitality. Shrinking societies in this view become rigid, conservative, and incapable of generating the next generation of breakthroughs. The empirical record is mixed. countries that have experienced fertility decline have not, by most measures, become poorer or less innovative. South Korea, Japan, Germany, and Italy remain among the most technologically and economically sophisticated nations on Earth. Their decline has been demographic, not civilizational, but the experience of projected decline, 50% population reduction over a century in some cases, has no historical precedent in peacetime. The closest cases were driven by famine, plague, or war. We do not know what a society looks like that contracts gradually, voluntarily, over generations, to roughly half its peak size. There are additionally distributional considerations. A shrinking population reduces some pressures and creates others. Housing becomes less scarce in declining regions, more scarce in concentrated metro areas. Schools close in some districts and overflow in others. Labor markets tighten in some sectors and collapse in others. The effects are not uniform. The 2025 work by Spears and Garuso, After the Spike, Population, Progress, and the Case for People, argues that the long-term economic consequences of declining population are likely to be substantially negative on the grounds that human beings are, in aggregate, the source of the innovations that drive prosperity. Other demographers, including Wolfgang Lutz at the Vienna Institute of Demography, have argued that the increase in education and human capital that accompanies fertility decline can substantially compensate for the loss in headcount. The same population, more educated, may produce more output than a larger, less educated population. And if both positions are defensible, neither has been empirically settled. What the data does not support is the casual assumption that a smaller human population is automatically good or automatically bad. The honest answer is that we are about to find out, and that the discovery will be the work of the rest of this century. Question 4. Is this reversible? The fourth question is the one most often posed by political leaders. The empirical answer, as covered earlier in this report, is consistent across the literature. No developed country, anywhere, has voluntarily restored its fertility rate to replacement level after falling below it. Policy interventions have produced modest, temporary effects. Hungary has spent 5% of GDP on family policy and produced a rise from 1.23 to 1.55, well below replacement and now plateauing. South Korea has spent over $270 billion since 2006, with no measurable effect. Singapore offers among the most generous baby bonuses in the world. Its fertility has not exceeded 1.2 in over a decade. The Nordic model, heavily subsidized childcare, generous parental leave for both parents, labor market flexibility for working mothers, sustains fertility around 1.5 to 1.8. It does not restore replacement. The honest reading of the evidence is that no policy lever yet identified can reliably push fertility back above 2.1 in a free society. Whether one will be discovered in the coming decades is unknown. Whether one is even possible, given the structural mechanisms documented in this report, is contested. What the data suggests is that any reversal, if it occurs, will not come from the levers governments are currently pulling. Cash transfers and subsidies have not worked. Cultural campaigns have not worked. Restrictive immigration has not addressed the underlying birth rate. Compulsion, where attempted historically, has produced human catastrophes without sustainable demographic effect. The reversal, if it happens, will likely have to come from a structural change in modern life that no government has yet engineered or chosen. What that change would look like is not currently visible in the data. In conclusion, the questions this report has examined are not easy. They are not, in their current form, fully answerable. The data tells us what is happening. It tells us how it is happening. It tells us, reasonably well, what is likely to happen next on present trajectories. It does not tell us whether to be worried. It does tell us several things with unusual clarity. The fertility decline is real, global, and accelerating in middle-income countries. The economic adjustment to an older, smaller population will be difficult, and the welfare state arrangements of the last 70 years cannot continue in their current form indefinitely. No country has reversed the trend through policy, despite extensive attempts. The American demographic exception is partial and temporary, dependent on a global supply of immigrants that is itself diminishing. What the data does not tell us is whether the world that emerges on the other side of this transition will be diminished, transformed, or, in ways not yet visible, better than the one being left behind. The countries furthest along the curve are not collapsing. They are also not thriving. They are adjusting slowly and at high cost to a configuration of human life that has no historical precedent. The rest of the developed world is on the same path. The middle-income world is following. By the end of this century, on current projections, the entire planet will be. Whether to be worried is ultimately a judgment about how confident one is in the human capacity to adapt to circumstances we have never faced before. The historical record on that question is mixed. The data on its own does not resolve it.